Well, we finally got a nice spring day, so I'm heading back down to the family lodge. Spring is actually starting to spring a little bit. We've got the red bud starting to come out in the trees. Bradford pears have already bloomed. You can tell the birds like the Bradford pears because they're starting to spread everywhere. Pink dogwood we've got in our backyard is starting to try to bloom. So I guess it is spring. Right now it's a sunny day, but you can see off to the south there's a cloud bank getting ready to move in. I think we're going to put up with that most of our day. My wife was asking me when I said I was going to do a YouTube channel. She said, "What's the purpose of the channel?" And I said, well, I seem to be the only one working on the family cabin right now, or family lodge. And I want to be able to document the things I'm doing. Maybe there'll be a help to somebody in the family. Or maybe it'll give ideas to other people that want to have the same type of thing, a family retreat or a place where they can have their family reunions. And then I got to thinking about it, and it's also, I think, a place where I can tell some of the family stories. Like I'd said before, my mom and dad bought this land in 1955. My dad was the assistant manager of public service, and he was also the distribution engineer. He worked with the mine companies on getting electric power out to the strip mines. Most of the strip mines use an electric drag line to take the overburden off the top of the coal, and then they come in with smaller shovels and take the coal out. So back in 55, the lineman for public service where he worked and for REMC were wanting to have a club or a place where they could get together and go out for a weekend or whatever. So my dad, being in with the coal companies, was able to find this property. It's part of the old Robin Hood mining complex. It was strip mine between 1944, or actually I think it was 1948 to 1949 was the last time. So it was about 6 years old. Been sitting barren for about 6 years without anything being done to it when they made that available. It was a Sherman Templeton Coal Company, I believe is the name of it. He bought the first 3 lots. Well, the first lot was actually bought by the club that they formed. They formed the Greenbrier Club. My parents, my dad built a log cabin there, built out of old utility poles. He started in about 1956, finished the base of it basically in 1961. They held on to possession of it until about 1972, when he was getting ready to retire, and they turned the property over to my 5 siblings and myself. There were 6 of us that owned it. We got together at my sister's house in Crawfordsville, Indiana. We drew up a contract on usage of the cabin and who was to pay what, the rules, things like that. And we basically ran this property like that until the late 1990s. Then some of our kids were old enough then to want to take an ownership in the property. So we came up with a limited liability corporation, transferred the property into the LLC, and then issued shares to each one of the 6 of us, or called units. My brother always made a big deal about that. It's not shares, it's units. But this allowed us then to pass units or shares down to our kids. Each one of us ended up with 30 shares. we've been able to pass it down. Both of my sons have shares. I've now passed it down to my grandson, my oldest grandson. He owns 7 shares now, I believe it is. So we are, my siblings and I call the 2nd generation. I call our kids the 3rd generation. And my grandson is part of the 4th generation. So we now have several 4th generation individuals that own shares in our property. And when I say shares, I mean units legally. So now we've got 4 generations that own the property. There's myself, 4 sisters. My brother died of COVID last year. We've got our kids, the 3rd generation, and now we've got some of the grandkids, or 4th generation, that own it. And there's a 5th generation out there, but they're still toddlers and youngins. So eventually it'll be passed down to them. One of the stipulations of the LLC that in order to have shares, you have to be related to my mom and dad through either birth or adoption. As I said, we started, my parents died in 1977. And we started holding, we had reunions before that, but they were sort of unofficial. We basically started holding an official reunion probably about 1977, 78. And we've had one every year with up to 50, 70 people that come into the property. When we get to the property, after I get through all these small roads, things you got to remember. I was 5 years old the first time. Well, I wasn't even quite 5. I was 4 and a half when I first visited the property. That's one of my first memories. And so my oldest sister is 12 years older than I am, so her memories are quite a bit different than mine. So when I tell these family history stories, there's a lot of difference between my stories and hers. She was a senior in high school when we started building on the log cabin. I was 5 years old. One of the ideas for doing stories on this channel was about 4 years ago at our family reunion. Myself and 5 siblings got together and we did a 2-hour interview with our grandniece, and telling stories about growing up, about our mom and dad. Because other than our children, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren never knew their great-grandparents. They've heard about them, they've seen their picture in the lodge, but they don't know them. So we sat down for about 2 hours and recorded all of our memories. That's when I discovered that my memories of the family are a lot different than my older sister's. And my younger sister, she was there by herself. She was 4 years younger than I am, and she was there with my parents for about 4 or 5 years, even after they retired. So her memories are different than mine. So any stories I tell on this channel will probably be slightly different than the memories that my siblings have, but they're my memories, and maybe somebody will get some use out of them. Now we'll just sit back and you can sit back and ride with me for a while. Here we are pulling in to the lodge.
How the lodge looked just a few years ago before we tore it down. This is what you would see as you pulled in, and this is the original lodge back in 1961. I've got a little video here to show. These are our neighbors. Those pine trees are now about 100 to 150 feet tall. These are the neighbors' houses now next to ours. All the trees in between, and then you'll see the cabin as it originally was. No porch on the front.
Showing you that the original cabin that my father built was made out of utility logs. This is the old Greenbrier Club cabin that the lineman built. It's now owned by my sister and her husband, and you can see the utility logs, exactly what ours was made out of. It was in a little bit better shape than ours was. You can see up there that it's starting to delaminate, insect holes. Once the creosote worked its way out, then all of a sudden the insects start coming back. We're talking about these poles were in the ground for 50 years before they were taken out and were allowed to be used for these cabins. Ours looked about the same, it's just it was smaller. I don't know what the size of this one is, but ours at the time was 20 feet by 30 feet. We now have our lodge is 30 feet by 40 feet. So it was quite a bit smaller than this. I think I'll do a second video just on how we came about building what we did and how we've formed the company to help out. But this is my sister's cabin. They're thinking of replacing it one of these days, but you can see it's nothing but old utility logs that were taken out of the ground and used for the cabin. When I was like 6-7 years old, I can remember being on the inside and helping put concrete chinky in between the logs. I don't think I did very much because at 6 or 7 I wasn't that big good a worker, but you can see what the structure looks like.
This is what the front of the old cabin used to look like. You can see we eventually put a full porch across the front of it. This is after 2008 because that's the year we built the bathroom structure you see to the left. The inside of the cabin had 2 bedrooms at one time, but eventually we tore that all out and just made a small kitchen area in one corner, and then the other area was nothing but a large room where people could congregate, or we could have a room to sleep. In the early 2000s, we started noticing differences to the logs caused by them drying out. The lack of creosote when the weather got hot, cracking of the logs, and in some instances, we had cases of infestation of insects. We had one colony of carpenter ants that, since no one was at the cabin for most of the year, got well established in some of the ceiling joist and support logs before anyone noticed it, and we were able to get it sprayed and get that problem taken care of. The drying logs also caused a problem with the physical security of the structure. As the logs began to shrink, gaps opened up between the soffits and the eaves and the logs on the exterior of the cabin. And we started having problems with animals being able to get inside of the structure. Over the winter of 2006, 2007, during that 5-month period when no one was at the cabin, raccoons were able to work their way in between the eaves and the logs, and they were able to use the cabin as their own personal restroom and defecated in almost every high log or the top of every high log that they could find. It took several members of the family several hours to clean up the mess. After this incident, I distributed an email to the membership with some ideas on what we should do in the future, including building a bathroom structure and replacing the front porch, and also doing some other work such as replacing the floor of the cabin. There was some comments at that time of some individuals who wanted to actually demolish the cabin and then put up a brand new structure. At the general membership meeting in 2007, the proposal to demolish the cabin and to build a new structure was voted down. We did vote to build a bathroom structure, and we budgeted the money for the resources. We also began discussion of what we should do with the front porch, and we agreed that the front porch needed to be replaced, the floor in the cabin needed to be replaced, and that I would start looking at proposals and start distributing it for comment by the membership. During the winter of 2008, I had a septic tank installed in the property just to the side of the old cabin. In the spring of the year, I started construction of the new bathroom facilities. Beginning of 2008, I also started distributing some ideas I had about a new front porch that would extend the roof up to where we could have a loft or dormers where people could sleep in the future. Spring of 2008, we had torrential rains for 2 days, brought almost 9 inches of rain at the cabin, and I received a call that the cabin was flooded and that the water had reached the bottom of the floor. Even when I got to the cabin 2 days later, the water was still sitting around in the front yard and was completely surrounding our pier and our deck. The floodwaters had almost flooded into the new septic tank and had reached an area almost to where we were going to build the new bathroom fixtures, which we had already allocated about $5,000 to pay for. I was also worried that the water had gotten onto the front porch and was higher than the tank of the shallow water system that we had. The floodwaters also reached the level of the floor, as you can see by the markings on the front step and also by the water lines on the side of the log. This was upsetting since we had allocated a budget for a brand new porch that would possibly be flooded. Flooding problems were caused by a neighbor who had replaced the original overflow with a 20-inch pipe that could be stopped up by debris and was completely inadequate for the size lake we have and the ditches that flow into it with rainwater. At the 2008 general meeting, I told everyone that I would continue on with the bathrooms, but that I was going to do nothing about the porch until we could find a resolution for the flooding. Once we paused new construction on the cabin, we began noticing more and more problems with the logs, infestation by insects that had tracks into the logs. The logs were shrinking because of their age. They were starting to delaminate, and even though we weren't exactly sure of what all these things were called, we figured that we needed to have somebody professional come and check out the facility. Over the period of 2008 through 2013, several of the members had ideas about friends or relations that they had that they might be able to have come out and inspect the log structure for us and give us their opinion of how secure the facility was. In the fall of 2012, my nephew had a friend who was a Purdue graduate, a mechanical engineer who also worked for his dad's construction company and had quite a bit of experience in structural integrity of buildings. He came out and free of charge, he walked around with us for a couple hours inspecting the logs, inspecting the entire structure, and giving us his opinion about things he was finding, and putting names to things like delamination and other things that we had no idea what they were. After a few weeks, he sent us a 3 or 4 page report. Basically, the report stated that the structure was unsound, that it was decomposing quickly, and that he would not spend any of his money to try to do any repairs, but that he would demolish and probably build new.
A couple things I want to show people. This is now the log that is second from the bottom under the kitchen, on the kitchen side. And when I stick my long screwdriver in there, you can see and I can feel that it's like paper, wet paper in there, wet cardboard. With that gap from where it's shrinking. I noticed earlier, and I took some pictures, it's like wet paper almost, just comes all right off. Where was it? I had noticed the insects are getting in here. There it is. There's a hole up here. You can see I've got about a 12-inch blade, and it goes the entire length. There's some foam in there that someone has tried to do something for it, but I don't know what has gotten in there, but something has eaten the wood completely away. On the side I was picking, you can just see that it's just coming apart in my hand.
After the report came out in the spring of 2013, I began a email string to the membership about what should we do. Many were of the same opinion as I was, that the structure was not sound enough to put more money into. But I was leaving it up to everyone else to come to grips with what they wanted to do. Most of the individuals thought that it needed to be demolished and we needed to do something new, build something new. Several of the members, though, were having a hard time with the fact that this was built by my father, who is no longer with us, and that they felt sort of as if we were betraying his trust by having it destroyed. At the 2013 general meeting, we decided to investigate the cost of having the structure demolished and having a pad built to build a new structure upon, and to start a discussion of what we thought that structure should be. After a great deal of family angst, we passed a resolution to demolish the old structure. We contracted with a local excavator to come in and tear down the old cabin and build us a pad for a new structure. In the first week of October 2013, we came together to prepare the cabin to be demolished in the following week.
Well, it's Thursday, October the 10th, and I just completed all the prep for the demolition. I've got the power back on to the outhouse. I had to run a wire from the pole over here. It may just be temporary for right now. We'll try to bury it when we come back here and bury the water. The see-through window is off. Amy was wanting that for a craft project. The doors are off. Someone said Greg wanted the doors for a project. I usually try to leave the cabin fairly clean when I leave. This time I've just been throwing junk inside of it. Almost everything is out, including the shower. I left the breaker box since it's too small and we're going to need another one. But the service on the outside is off. As you can see, there's no door. No doors here. The porch is almost completely empty. Water is gone. Window is gone. Spring is gone. Get that nice spring sound for the kids. There is a corner flag for where the pad will be placed. As you can see, it's in front of the tree, about where we had planned on putting the porch. You can see the other flag. It lines up just about even with the outside of the current porch. We've moved it over a little. I dug out the electrical and the water, and they are just rolled to the, or the water just rolled to the side. I've got the electricity running to the bathrooms again. I just took the cable and ran it over the roof of Pat and John's shed. It's only 7 feet up, so people have to be careful of it. But it's fastened tightly on both ends. I disconnected, I numbered all the boxes with the circuit breakers inside. 7 and 8 no longer work because I've got those breakers, using those for the bathroom. And as you can see, we've got both yard barns filled and stuff sitting outside and wrapped. Everything is hopefully out of the way, and it may be next week when Dale gets here. And goodbye, old gal.
Demolition, this is what it looked like to pull back into the property. My brother-in-law John volunteered to work as basically the project manager on this and work with the gentleman doing the excavation to take down the structure and to also build us the pad that you see here, so that we could build a structure of basically 30 by 40. So I believe the pad ended up being 34 by 46 feet. And one of the things he asked him to do was to raise up the pad so that we had at least 2 more feet of clearance over the lake because of the continued flooding because of the poor drainage in the overflow. Demolition of the old cabin and the construction of the new pad was completed in the fall of 2013. This gave us the entire winter for the pad to cure before we needed to come up with an idea for a structure. We had even discussed that if we had to, we could rent a tent for our family reunion for the next year. But we started passing ideas around about what we wanted. To start the discussion, I came up with the idea of just having a structure put up, such as a pole barn, where we would do most of the work. Started suggesting that the structure be a shelter house with an enclosed kitchen. But we'll discuss in the next video history how the lodge came about and what it took to get it done. And for now, this will end this video, and I hope you enjoy this. If you do, hit the like button, hit subscribe to get informed when the new one comes out.